Hi and welcome back to Education for Life, and today I'm going to be talking about life in the trenches during World War One. So what was the daily routine like? Soldiers could spend any time from a few days to a few months in the trenches. In the rest of the camp they were either training, eating, resting or entertaining. Every day they had to maintain morale, do kit inspections, rifle inspections and several different jobs. Any free time was normally spent writing and reading letters or diaries, playing cards or trying to snatch a few extra moments of sleep. Life in the front line was always extremely dangerous. The routine of frontline soldiers included looking out for constant hazards, raids and patrols. This is an example of a typical day in the trenches. 5 a.m, stand to arm. 5:30, daily rum ration. 6, stand down. 7, breakfast. 8, clean themselves and weapons and tidy the trenches. 12 p.m, dinner. After dinner, sleep and downtime. 5 p.m, tea. 6, stand to arms. 6:30, stand down half. 6:30 onwards, work all night with time for rest. In the trenches, soldiers had several different jobs. Going on raids, sentry duty, patrolling the area, filling sandbags, putting out, fixing or replacing barbed wire, repairing trenches, pumping out flooded sections, digging latrines, spying on opponents, sneaking across no man's land, mining, emptying latrines and lookout posts. What were the living conditions in the trenches like? They were long, narrow ditches, muddy, uncomfortable, the toilets were overflowing, it was cold and wet and seen as an accommodation with rats. The rats stole food rations and caused damage to things like sacks as they chewed through them. Health. To prevent malnutrition, the food consisted of a lot of meat, veg and carbs. The food was often better than what soldiers had back at home. The average amount of calories they had per day was 4,500 calories to give them enough energy. Due to the muddy and damp environment, many soldiers developed trench foot. Trench foot is when skin is exposed to moisture for too long and it begins to rot. It can be treated, but if it isn't, soldiers might have to get their foot or feet amputated. Because of trench foot, it became mandatory for soldiers to change their socks and wash their feet regularly. Soldiers were sleep deprived. They couldn't sleep during the night as they had to be alert in case the enemy attacked, and they had morning duties. Their only time to sleep was late in the morning or the afternoon. However, they were often interrupted by announcements, rats or other things. Soldiers became so tired that it was hard to think straight and thus hard to keep alert in places like no man's land or the battlefield. Sometimes, the letters to and from home were the only thing keeping the soldiers going. It was important that they maintained morale, otherwise they might get shell shock. This is when the brain can't handle all the stress, action, worry, etc. and shuts down. As there were many rats in the trenches, soldiers often caught diseases from them as they were wild. Many soldiers also lost their fingers and toes due to frostbite in the cold weather. The food soldiers consumed included meat, veg, 2 teaspoons of rum, stale bread, canned food, tea, hard tasteless biscuits, pea soup, watery stew, cheese, jam and bacon. Now for the layout and design of the trenches. There were sandbags stacked up on top of each other and lined the trench walls to provide protection for the soldiers against bullets. They were filled with earth and mud. There was a limit to how far the soldiers could dig trenches, so sandbags would be used for coverage. The trenches consisted of the front line, the support and the reserve. Barbed wire was used around the trenches to prevent or slow down intruders. Trenches were built in zigzags for protection, and if the enemy entered the trenches, there would be some defence. Trenches tended to be approximately 6 feet wide and 7 feet deep. Some trenches were even deeper, so a fire step would be used. At the bottom of trenches there were duckboards, which were used to form a path. There were safe places in the trenches called dugouts, which were very important. It was the only safe place for soldiers. They also provided shelter from the weather. Weapons and equipment included rifles with a bayonet on the end, gas masks, haversacks, ammo, protective clothing, webbing kits, shovels, artillery shells, tanks, machine guns, flamethrowers, mortars, aircraft, hand grenades, water bottles, shrapnel shells, battleships, submarines, pistols, field guns, snipers, goatskin garments, puttees, and poison gas. What was the Christmas truce? On Christmas Eve during the First World War, soldiers from both sides put down their weapons and met in no man's land. They sang Christmas carols and gave each other gifts. The Germans gave the British sausages and the British gave the German chocolates. They also played football. The truce lasted until New Year. Finally, here's some extra info. Soldiers used periscopes so they could observe the battlefield from the trenches. Many soldiers kept diaries or journals to keep a record of their experiences and feelings. Dogs had many uses. They were used as rat catchers and were commonly on site at the front line. They also carried messages between trenches, scouted for hidden enemies, carried medical supplies to injured men, and acted as watchdogs. Soldiers sometimes received parcels from home containing treats like chocolate, sweet biscuits, and tins of sardines. Haversacks held personal items such as a knife, fork, mug, shaving kit, soap, and food rations. It also formed part of the webbing kit. Attached to the webbing kit was a water bottle, tools, and pockets for ammo. And the soldiers were mixed race. And that's all for today. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed today's video, then don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.